PacMan Museum. Available for PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and Steam. The version featured in this review is the Steam version because that's the one I bought and I don't have the other two. Although I have to assume all three versions are pretty much the same, save for the whole trophy and achievements thing. So what's PacMan Museum? Well, it's a compilation of various classic Pac-Man games, including the original Pac-Man, Pac Mania, Pac Attack, PacLand, Pac Super Pac-Man, Pac-Man Champion Edition, PacMan Arrangement, and Pac-Man Battle Royale, the multiplayer one. I'm not going to go into heavy detail with each of these games because chances are you've seen them before, and played them before even, but for the few who haven't played any of these titles, what the fuck's wrong with you? Here's a quick rundown of each game. First up, we got Pac-Man, the one that started it all. You run around a maze and eat all the dots while avoiding the ghosts. Although if you eat a power pellet, you can turn the ghosts blue, which makes them edible for bonus points. Fairly simplistic and rudimentary fare, but still a fun time had by all. Not a bad start for an eventual franchise. Next up, we have Super Pac-Man, Namco's own sequel to Pac-Man, where you eat keys to unlock doors and subsequently eat fruit to clear the map. And you eat green pellets to become Super Pac-Man, essentially a bigger Pac-Man impervious to ghosts and able to devour doors. Not as good as classic Pac-Man in my opinion, but it has its fans I suppose, so sure. Pac-Pal, pretty much a derivative of Super Pac-Man where you collect cards to unlock doors and have to gobble all the items to clear the map. The gimmick here is not only do you have to avoid the ghosts, but you also have a rival character called Miro who will steal the bonuses and take him back to home base, and you have to take the bonus from him if you want to get a perfect score or something. Much like Super Pac-Man, this isn't a favorite of mine, but it's alright I guess. Next up we have PacLand, a side-scrolling platform game of sorts where you move from left to right and avoid ghosts unless you stumble across a power pellet which turns them blue and make them edible, and you know the deal. You can walk, run, and jump. Never got to play this one until now, and quite honestly I don't think it's that bad of a game. It's nothing special really, it's your typical cartoony side-scrolling game that moves left to right, but it's alright, I kinda like this one. Pac-Mania. Pretty much the same deal as classic Pac-Man except in an isometric view and with prettier graphics. Pac-Man now has a jump ability that can be useful in certain situations, and it's the most controllable jump you could get in one of these games. Lots of different mazes, power-ups that grant temporary boosts, and a solid challenge. My favorite Pac-Man game of the bunch. PacMan Arrangement, another modernizing of the original Pac-Man game, with new mazes, graphics, and other bells and whistles such as speed boosters and things of that nature. This particular version is based on the game featured on the Namco Museum Battle compilation for PlayStation Portable, rather than the arcade Pac-Man Arrangement from 1996, which was included in the Namco Museum set for PlayStation 2 and Xbox One. The original Xbox, not the current one with the spy camera. Anyway, this one's not too bad, a bit more enhanced in a way, but I honestly prefer the arcade variant. Pac Attack, a puzzle game of sorts where you clear lines of blocks and try to position ghosts in a way that the occasional Pac-Man can eat them for bonus points. There's a couple different modes such as your marathon mode and your puzzle mode. Not that bad of a puzzle game actually, but one that I don't touch all that often. Pac-Man Championship Edition, originally an Xbox Live Arcade release from 2005 that revived the Pac-Man brand. Didn't know when it was actually dead, but it did make Pac-Man remotely popular again with the youngins. Now, no doubt some folks are going to cry foul if they haven't already that the included edition is the original Championship Edition and not the upgraded Championship Edition DX Plus version, which is a far superior game, that much I'll agree with, but I can understand the decision-making process here. After all, Pac-Man Championship Edition DX Plus is still being sold, and Championship Edition, the original, is only available on Xbox Live, if it's still there, PSP, and maybe a couple mobile phone formats. That, and I already have the DX Plus version, and likely so do you. And if you don't, get it, it's well worth the money. And finally, you have Pac-Man Battle Royale, a largely multiplayer affair where you and 3 other players are competing for survival, and whoever wins the most rounds win the game or something to that extent. It's actually not a bad idea, makes for a great party game, and you'd think it'd be the best reason to buy the PacMan Museum, but unfortunately, what kills the appeal of this game is the inexplicable lack of online multiplayer functionality. So unless you could find 3 pals locally to compete against, you'll most likely be competing against a single computer opponent who, quite frankly, isn't very bright. And that's a massive letdown because a game like Battle Royale could have benefited immensely from an online multiplayer component. Alas, this is not to be. Oh, and you can also get Miss Pac-Man as DLC for free before March 31st, after which point you'll have to pay money for it. Of course, by the time you're watching this video, March 31st will have come and gone, so you're screwed either way and you have to pay the $5 if you want the game. In any case, Miss Pac-Man is the sequel to Pac-Man. That wasn't made by Namco, but they took it in anyways, cause fucking Miss Pac-Man. With 4 new mazes to play through and much more pleasant sound effects. In all honesty, I prefer the misses over the original, but your mileage may vary. They're both great games regardless. For the most part, all the games in PacMan Museum perform about as well as you expect them to by this point. All of them near perfect emulations and or conversions of their original incarnations. Visuals are crisp, sound is clear, and control is perfectly fine. There are some additional options you could tweak such as difficulty, starting lives, and other tidbits, and you also have a round select that can enable you to start at any round up to the last one you cleared. Of course, altering any of these options will disqualify you from earning any stamps. You'll need to challenge the games with the default settings to earn stamps that will eventually unlock items to fill your pack room in the main menu with pack stuff. Meh. As good as these games are and as well as they play, I do have some quibbles with the collection. Obviously, there's a lack of online multiplayer which greatly hinders the appeal of the Battle Royale game, because how often can you get 4 people together in the same room to play this thing? You wouldn't have a problem if the game was at an arcade establishment or a more public forum where there's more people, but that's not always the case. Also, the other thing is that I just wish there was an option to scale the playfield for some of these games. Yes, they look the part, they look very good for what they are, and I'm sure they're in the proper aspect ratio, but more often than not, these games only cover a third of the overall screen area, and the rest of the space is filled with solid, empty-looking backdrop that might have something else lined up like an artwork of Pac-Man or something, but that's about it. I just wish there was an option where you could fill the screen a little more, or at the very least, make the play area a little bigger, but yeah. Alright, look, here's the thing. PacMan Museum is a nice compilation of Pac titles, but outside of Battle Royale, which was largely an arcade game few people got a chance to play, you can pretty much find these games anywhere and everywhere else, given how many times they've been re-released to the masses over the past 15 to 20 years. Sure, presentation-wise, it looks fairly nice. The games play great. And there's a bunch of achievements and stamps and trophies to collect if you obsess over that sort of thing. And while there's a number of Pac titles included here, and it's a fine selection of titles that's nicely varied for the most part, I can't help but wonder if they couldn't sneak in a couple more titles to truly justify that $20 price tag. Something like Pac in Time, or hell, toss in Pac-Man 2, The New Adventure for the lulz. A little something more than merely unlocking random objects to fill a little room, because that honestly feels like a weak reward. Overall, if you already own a number of Namco Museum compilations released over the past several years, there's nothing in PacMan Museum that's really new outside of the Battle Royale game that lacks the online component. I suppose if you just want a bunch of Pac-Man games under one compilation, and you've avoided all the aforementioned compilations, then PacMan Museum might very well interest you. Whether you'd be willing to fork over the $20 for a handful of Pac-Man titles is entirely up to you. I personally don't regret the purchase, and I got my share of enjoyment from the museum, but I also enjoy these little compilations in general, so yeah, I'd say if you're willing to fork the $20 for this set, go for it. Otherwise, I suggest waiting for a price drop if it happens.